Hello, everybody. Jonathan here, and I know it's been a long time since I made a video, and I want to explain a little bit why that has been and what you can expect in the future during this video. First, I just want to say that several people from the community have reached out to me over the last year and a half, especially with all the craziness with the pandemic and other things, just to make sure that everything is going okay on my end. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate that there are those of you out there who care that much when you don't see content from me for a while to just, reach out, check in, make sure everything's going okay. But I assure you everything is good. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate everyone else in the community. Even if you didn't reach out to ask what was going on, I do keep track of your content. I do watch it. I do enjoy it. If you're a content maker for Axis and Allies, so please keep that up. I do enjoy those videos, even if I haven't been able to post anything for quite some time. I do want to talk a little bit about why that has been, because there have been a few reasons. One, and perhaps this might seem kind of frivolous to some of you, but I resisted upgrading my phone for a long time. I used to be on, like, every 2 years you could upgrade and you'd pay a couple $100s and get a new phone. And I did that for a while with my smartphones, but that has become increasingly difficult, if not impossible to do. And so my last phone I got back in, I think it was 2015, thereabout, and it was just hanging on to it and hanging on to it and hanging on to it because it worked well enough. And I did some things to extend its lifespan. It had issues with the battery there towards the end, just not holding a charge for very long, but I was able to take a charger into work and do different things so that even though it couldn't even last a full day, I was able to hold on to it, and it was still useful. Unfortunately, going along with that, the memory space in the phone gradually filled up and filled up and filled up, and because I wasn't getting a new phone, and also because recording takes a fair amount of power, and it couldn't really, trying to record and then upload really drained the battery. And there was only enough space for, a 10-minute video at most. I think towards the end it was even, a 6 or 7-minute video was all my phone could hold. It just wasn't as practical to do as in the earlier days. I have recently upgraded my phone to a brand new one, which I hope to have also, for 5 to 6 years again. But right now it has plenty of space and the battery is working quite well. But there are some other things that have happened over the last year and a half. September 2019, I proposed to my girlfriend, and she said yes. I won't leave you all in suspense. She did say yes, but then we've been planning for a wedding and planning for our future together. And then the pandemic hit, which pandemic had all of its own complications, but then trying to plan and coordinate a wedding in the midst of all of that added a whole additional layer of complexity. And my wife and I met online, and so there was a little bit of distance between us, certainly something that was still drivable, but it wasn't as if she just lived in the same town or one town over. So that took a fair amount of time. We were able to get married on the date that we had planned way back, well before the pandemic, and that was this past September. That's why I had to pause for a second, because we got engaged September of 2019 and got married in September of 2020. But then with that came an adjusted honeymoon. We're still hoping to take our originally planned honeymoon or something close to it, hopefully late this year, but we'll see how things go. But we took a much more toned down honeymoon, and then the task of house shopping began. And the market where we were looking was particularly hot, and so that took some time, but we were able to find a house that we both liked, and worked through the bank and purchased that, and set up the mortgage and everything, and then coordinate to get our stuff moved in. Me moving from my place, her moving from her place. We got moved in, and the day after we had all of our stuff moved, it began to snow, and I think we got 6 inches or more of snow, and it's just been brutal. We're still in Illinois. I don't want to give out specifics on the internet, but we are still in Illinois. But just the snow and the weather, it's been brutal around here. I hope that everyone else in the community is doing well as far as the pandemic and housing and everything goes. I know that my wife and I are very fortunate, and we're very thankful for that. We did come down with COVID last October. Thankfully, it happened after the wedding, and it was several weeks afterwards, so we're pretty sure we didn't get it from anybody there, and none of our guests were sick or anything, and we took all the precautions that we could. We reduced our guest list, we made sure tables were spaced out, masks, all of that stuff. We had the most socially distant, protective pandemic wedding and reception as possible, while it's still being a reception. So we felt pretty good about that. We were careful to abide by all governmental regulations, as well as all venue regulations. And then on top of that, anything in addition that we just thought would be a good practice. So we tried to be very, very careful with that, and it all went great. But we did, in October, both come down with COVID. Thankfully, neither of us needed to be hospitalized. My case was fairly mild, not to say that everyone's will be, and I don't want to suggest to anyone to not take it seriously. I'm just thankful that my case was relatively mild. I was just had a fever for about a week, on and off, and was just really tired for a day or so. My wife got hit harder with the tiredness. Several days she was tired, and temperature fluctuating both up and down for her. We watched that very carefully, and got some advice from local doctors, and were able to pull through from that. But I would encourage everyone, take it seriously. I know that I'm fortunate that my case was mild. My wife's case, neither of ours required hospitalization, but I know that's not true for everybody. And we do what we can so that those who are most susceptible to severe cases, the elderly, those with immunocompromised systems, that they are protected as much as we can. And I entrust everyone to do what they think is best. As they should. I'm not going to tell you to do or not to do anything. I'm just telling you what my experience was and what my thoughts are on it. And I think that we all should be left to use our best judgment, whatever that means for you. I'm not going to, knock or advise or wag my finger or anything like that. And I know the community around where we live is trying to do the same, and there are differing opinions on that. And everyone should just do what they think is best, I think. That's my opinion on it, and that's all that I will say. But we did both come down with it, so that just added an extra layer of complexity. I will say that getting Games of Axis and Allies in hasn't really happened during this period. I'm hoping that once the weather starts getting a little bit nicer and I'm out in the community a little bit more up here, I'll be able to find some other people who play. But we shall see. I have been doing a lot of reading over the last year and a half or so, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been reading. And you may find it interesting, you might not, and that's okay. Maybe some of them you'll find interesting, and some not. One book that I actually don't have a copy of because a friend loaned it to me is called Saturn Run. It's a science fiction novel set in the not too distant future. I think it's less than 100 years, and it's about a UFO, in a sense, that is discovered around Saturn, and the Americans are trying to send a ship out there and but the Chinese actually already had a ship that was prepped to go to Mars. That there was a lot of hype about, and then they changed at the last minute because they also realized there's a UFO out by Saturn, so they modify their Mars spacecraft to try and get out of there. And so there's a little bit of personal drama that's going on between different individuals, and then there is the political drama that's going on with these two powers trying to get out there, and then what do they find out there, and what happens. And then what does that mean for the future? So there's multiple layers, and then there's also some actual science, thrown in there, which I found really intriguing. Just the ideas, the people the authors really did their research on it, and so it was a little bit of an intimidating book. The friend who loaned it to me spoke highly of it. It took me a little while to get into it, but then once I did, I was hooked. And so if you enjoy science fiction, especially science fiction that isn't so far in the future, that there's just so much technology we're not familiar with, Saturn Run, really enjoyed that, highly recommend it. Other books that I have been reading, so a lot of history-related books, so I have some off to the side. This book is called The Grand Design. It's a U.S. Civil War book. And it talks about the different strategies of different generals and things that worked well and things that didn't work well. If you like military history, especially relating to the Civil War, I recommend this book. I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's not the greatest book I've ever read, but it's intriguing. That book actually references, so it's talking about the Civil War generals, but it's talking about, they were stuck in this, I don't remember the French general's name, but he was like an associate of Napoleon, and they all were, they all had read his book and were following, his precepts and things like that, and what they really should be listening to, they would have done so much better, this author thinks, is if they'd been reading Clausewitz, who was also contemporary, but he was a Prussian general, if I remember right, and then he defected over to the Russians when Prussia was overrun by Napoleon. I think that's right. Any of you who are an expert on Clausewitz, please, in the comment section, elaborate or correct me if I'm misremembering. But I looked on my bookshelf and I realized that I have Clausewitz. So I have his On War. So I read most of this. I skimmed certain parts. If you're wanting to learn about like military strategy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 19th century strategy, though that was when he lived, but a lot of his ideas and things like that, and artillery, cavalry, and infantry, that combination, I think still applies for the most part. And so I found this to be an interesting read. It is a little bit more dry, some parts a lot more dry. But if you're interested in military theory, this is an excellent book for you. Now, as I was looking and found On War, I thought, well, there's another book on war, Sun Tzu, that people reference. And so I looked over Sun Tzu. This is a much quicker read in Clausewitz. It's not as dry. It's kind of more, I wouldn't say soundbite-ish, because it isn't as if, everything is little quips, but it's lots of little shorter maxims. Like in this situation, when you are weak, appear to your enemy as if you are strong, and when you are strong, make your enemy think that you are weak. Things like that. It's generally clever little things, and it's an interesting read. It's certainly less dry, but most of it, you start to see the same themes over and over again. It's about subterfuge and misleading your opponent into trapping them and not letting them know what you're up to. Make them think you're doing something different than what you're actually doing, and by that you can entrap them, or you can make them hesitate when you're really weak, so that you have a chance to regroup and recalibrate yourself. So there's a lot of this in here. Not saying that it's bad or anything like that. It's a little bit intriguing, but if you're looking for a really, really deep thought, you're probably not going to find it in here, but that's okay. So I'll put that off to the side. Kind of continuing with the history theme, I have had on my shelf The Guns of August for quite some time. This is about the lead up to World War I and then the early stages of World War I, which began in August of 1914. And I've had it on my shelf for quite some time, but hadn't actually read it. And so I read it, and if you're interested in, if you like history, if you're interested in World War I at all, or if you think that it's just something that you don't know a whole lot about and you'd like to learn a little bit more, I would recommend this book. I found it to be engaging. And it's not super deep, but it does talk to you about, or tell you about what this general was doing and, the interactions and things like that, kind of at a high level, as a friend, telling a story might tell it, without getting too deep into the weeds that it's hard to keep track of who's doing what and when. So definitely would recommend this. It's a classic for a reason. Going along with the World War I theme, I had this book. I bought it from a local museum a number of years ago. It's about General Hindenburg and Ludendorff, who were very involved in Germany during World War I, and some say kind of became de facto dictators of it. I'll let you decide on that, but this talks about their experience and how their influence expanded during World War I, and I found it intriguing and engaging. It's just called The Warlords. Another friend loaned me this book. This is called Armageddon, and it is about post-World War II Germany for the next few years, so right at the end of the war, and then going up to around the time of the Berlin airlift. And from what I am able to glean, it's meant to entertain. It's based on real events, but the name and some of the people I recognize from history, but all the names of people have been changed, and I'm sure that there's some dramatization that has been included, filling in the blanks of things that are actually recorded in history with some people's personal stories. And but I found it to be very intriguing. It starts out with like an American commander who's been put in charge of a smaller German town to occupy it, and kind of the things that happen there. And then later in the book, he gets transferred to Berlin, and a lot of the things that are happening between the West and the Soviets. And so I found it really intriguing. It made me think back to high school and then college history. This is a part of history that gets talked about, but it often gets glossed over with some of the bigger events, like World War II ends, and then the occupying force, and then immediately going into the Berlin blockade, and then the airlift, and then the Korean War. And so this focuses on just those couple of years in between through the eyes of characters that are, I think, based on real characters, but also probably made up to a degree. And so I found it very intriguing. So I definitely recommend it if you like military history, or if you want to learn a little bit more about the origins of the Cold War. I think that comes through here very clearly. So Armageddon by Leon Uris. I also wanted to get into medieval history a little bit, and so I read this. This is kind of a summary of medieval history, the Oxford History of Medieval Europe by George Holmes. And this was an okay book. It covers a lot of history fairly quickly. I mean, there's a couple hundred pages. Let's see, that's the index. So where does the actual text is a little over 300 pages, and it covers multiple centuries, going back and forth, talking about different areas and things that were developing, and people and government structures and all of that. So if you like medieval history, I think this gives a good overview of it. It doesn't try and cover any particular thing super deeply, but it does cover a lot of history. So I recommend that if you like medieval history. The book that I'm reading right now that's also been on my shelf for quite some time is Herodotus, the father of history, some call him. and he was an ancient Greek historian. And what he did, he traveled all over the place, to Greece, to Egypt, to the Mesopotamia area, just listening to the stories that people would tell about their origins, about their own history, their prior kings, and things like that. Things that they experienced firsthand, as well as things that they had heard handed down. And he does have a reputation for exaggerating, and based on some of the numbers that I've seen so far, I definitely would agree with some of those exaggerations, but he does his best. And one of the things that's interesting about him is that he'll tell you a story, or he'll preface a story with, well, this is the story that the so-and-sos tell, but I don't think that it's really true. What I think is a more reliable tale is what these other people tell about the same thing. Or he might say that he doesn't really know which story is true, but here are 3 versions that different people tell, and then he'll give you each one. And some of this stuff reminds me of Game of Thrones sorts of things. So George R.R. Martin maybe got some of his stuff from Herodotus, who knows, or from other ancient sources. But it is entertaining. It is an entertaining story, or series of stories in here. I'm still working on this one. But it is a long book. It's what? Let's see, that's still index. But it's it's about 600 pages, this iteration of it anyway. So I've been reading, little bits at a time and making it through. The last book that I want to touch on, and I just finished it recently, just ordered it and finished it, is this book. It's called Broken, 7 Christian Rules That Every Christian Ought to Break as Often as Possible. And you might wonder, well, what in the world is this about? It is about different ideas, or ideologies in a sense, not like individual ideas, but things that we often get wrapped into, I won't give away too much, but 7 kind of precepts or ideas that we get wrapped up into in Christianity, or probably any religion really, that we tend to make those into our God rather than actual God. Like he talks about mysticism, the idea that you can find God through your feelings, is one of the things that he talks about in here, and how that's not, how there can be problems with that. But that isn't the only one. There are other things that he talks about as well. Finding God in yourself is another thing. So I found it to be interesting. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and certainly written better and more thoughtful than anything that I would put together on the subject. It's not a dry, heavy doctrinal sort of book, but I think that there's value in it, and I enjoyed it. So if you're kind of intrigued by that sort of writing, I would recommend it. I think that covers everything that I have been reading so far. Certainly I've been up to other things, but today I just want to kind of share what I've been up to. Everything is good on my front. And then what have I been up to? In addition to all of the pandemic and getting married and buying a house and moving in and organizing and buying furniture, and all of that stuff, lots of reading. And so I thought if you enjoy my channel, you might enjoy some of the things that I've been reading, and maybe I can help you find something to put on your reading list. If not, that's totally fine too. As far as future content on this channel, I don't want the channel to just kind of wither on the vine and die. I don't know what I'll be posting or how often. My hope is to find people around this community that also play Axis and Allies, and maybe do kind of play-by-plays, or in between each round do like a recap and post that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So that's kind of where things are right now. Wanted to give you all a heads up on that, and when I feel like I'm in a position to post additional content, I will. But everything is good on this front, and I hope that everything is good for all of you as well. All right, see you later.